Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to talk about getting rejected. So a subscriber of mine for quite some time now, I recognize even like their photo here on LinkedIn as they've messaged me. They had this question on the fact that they had interviewed specifically at this one firm. They had this happen twice though. So let me give you a little background here. Quant dev role. Again, first round is going to be general discussion and brain teasers with the hiring manager. 2 is going to be C++ based application and analysis. Again, some stock information and data being thrown in, doing some exercises, using a little bit of SQL and Python as well, some Q&A on that. And then 2 rounds with a senior and a junior quant dev and their team. And then finally 7 rounds, similar to virtual on-site with the entire team, 4 live coding rounds, and 3 rounds quant CS questions. They said they did fairly well with all the rounds, except for they needed a little bit of help on a recursion problem, which is fine. And then they said they were rejected after all of this with a very, very just general email. And they felt quite dejected and mailed them for specific feedback. Essentially, they got ghosted and no feedback was supplied. So they said they've had this happen basically at 2 firms. Done great, did the interviews, everything seemed awesome, and then they got kind of a general rejection. And they're wanting to know if I can shed a little more light on what's going on, why this happens. And of course, I have a million stories I could tell you guys, but I'm going to try to dive into the details and try to be as concise as possible because this is not a podcast episode. But they had 2 specific questions. One being, are so many rounds of interview necessary to judge a candidate? So let me start with that, I guess. Yes, tons and tons and tons of rounds are necessary and you still can't make the right decision. So hiring someone is extremely challenging here. I interview a little bit differently than most. Again, this is buy side. Buy side's just different than sell side, guys. Different people, different atmospheres, different personalities. But there's a lot of the same similarities in the hiring process and whatnot. I've seen firms do round after round after round after round. Part of this is they're trying to make sure they have the candidate because hiring is extremely expensive. So to give you a little bit of perspective on price here, if you use a recruiter, which means I give a job posting, I still have to write the job description. I still have to go through that process. I still have to post it online for legal reasons. And then I give it to a bunch of recruiters that are like sharks, or piranhas. They're just going after scraps. They don't even care. They just want the posting. They want to get paid for it. So you could have, 5, maybe 10 recruiters. Usually I only have a couple. Like if I use I have 1 or 2 at most. And I'm not a big fan of using recruiters because of the cost aspect with this. But if a recruiter often wants 20 to 30% of that candidate's 1-year salary. So think about that. Let's just say they're $100,000. $100,000 is, good starting salary here. They might have more. Again, a lot of people are like, Dimitri, you're underpricing everybody. Well, a lot of times on buy side too, your salaries are going to be lower because your bonus is going to be a bigger portion of your performance here. But anyways, let's just say $100,000, 20%. I got to pay $20,000 for you to go out and find a candidate, right? Like I get someone and I interview them myself and then I hire them thinking they're a great candidate. Cost me $20,000 right at bat, maybe $30,000. Now, some recruiting firms are like, oh, I'll do it for 10%. I'll do it for, they're like desperate to get this. Some of them do 30-day guarantee, 90-day guarantee. We'll swap you out and give you another candidate if this one doesn't work within 90 days or something. Like they treat you like a commodity. It's one reason I'm not a big fan of recruiters. They're expensive and they often don't find the best talent, which is kind of surprising. But it's expensive just on that front, okay? That's just, imagine 20, 30 grand for a bottom end junior employee. You're talking mid-senior levels, it'd knock you back, I don't know, it could be, $50, $60, $70,000 for a hire. So these aren't cheap processes to find somebody. And then on top of that, if you hire someone and you find them and you put them in the position and they don't work out, some states have employment contracts at will. So Texas, where I'm at, has that, meaning I can just let you go for no reason. I don't need to tell you. I just let you go. Other states, like some of the liberal states, like I think like New York, California, Boston, so Massachusetts. Boston's in Massachusetts, I know. Anyways, those states have really strict, we care about the employees. And so you have to go through this full process and document all this paperwork and give all these reasonings. And it's a nightmare. So if you hire the wrong candidate and I'm paying them a bunch of money because I'm wanting them to do a specific job and they can't do the job technically, that's an issue. The other issue is character, personality traits. This is a huge part. The quant space is like completely blind to. I don't know why, but they think like if I'm smart enough, it doesn't matter that I'm a real pain in the backside to deal with. It doesn't matter that no one likes me. It does matter. That's going to determine your promotions. That's going to determine if you stay there or not. There are a lot of issues with personality traits and characteristics and communication, and the fact that we all communicate mathematics and not the business side. There's tensions, there's all kinds of issues on top of that you have to consider when doing the hiring process here. So to answer that portion of the question, it's expensive. Also to give you a perspective on just the hiring cost internally if I don't use a recruiter, because I've never used one. I don't use them. I don't like using recruiters. Rare cases would I ever use one. But let's just say, so this individual is talking about interviews. Let's say first round is 1 hour, one person. Second round, let's just say it's one person for another hour. Then the third one was 2 rounds. So that's another 2 people for another hour each. And then 7 rounds. So 7 plus 4 here is going to be 11. Just keep that in perspective here. If a bottom end employee is making $100,000, let's just hypothetically say they work, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. That's 2,080 hours. We figure that out per hour. So 100,000 divided by 2080, it's going to give you $48 an hour. Okay. So you think about 11 times $48, you're looking at $528, right? Not a lot, but as the person mentioned, they're doing hiring managers, they're doing, senior people. Some people might be making, about $500,000 a year. So you start backing these out, you're looking at about, $240 per hour. So let's just say $240 an hour times 11 people or 11 sessions. That's $2,600 and $2,640 basically to do the interviews. Now, on top of that, right, that's just looking at it from an accounting perspective. You still have the HR people that have to go through the resumes and process that. And then this is just one candidate. So it's $2,000 for a candidate. Now, if you fly anybody in, you're looking at probably another $1,200 to $1,500, maybe $2,000 for flights, hotel, food, other stuff like that. You start adding these sorts of things in here. Hiring costs thousands of dollars to do this. This is not a free process. Hiring is very expensive and it's very challenging. And I've mentioned in a lot of my videos here, which has upset many people, is there aren't very many quants or quant devs. This is a quant dev position. There aren't very many really good quant devs out there. They just don't exist. Again, getting the skill set, the depth, even hiring from a junior level, right? You want someone who's going to be very technically well-rounded and good at what they do. You also want someone that's going to have that quant personality that just loves to learn, taking on projects on their own. They need minimal hand-holding. Figuring that out's challenging because you can't just ask people, like, are you a self-starter and a good learner, or are you lazy and just don't like to work? Like, no one's going to tell you, like, I really just don't like to work. I really just want to hang out and collect a paycheck. Like, no one's going to tell you that, but the reality is you have to weed that out. And then on top of that, you have to figure out the personality piece here. So, complaining about having to do all these rounds and interview all these people. One, they're weeding out different skill sets to see how you actually perform versus what you put on the resume. Obviously, this person's resume has got to be great because they've already had 2 full sets of rounds with 2 different companies. So that's excellent. The fact that you've gone multiple rounds as well, that means like you're doing actually pretty good in each round here. So keep that in perspective here. And then that final third piece here, those characteristics and like personality traits and fitting company culture. So you could be the world's best quant and you might not fit at a specific firm. If you're the world's best quant, I'm going to venture out there, you're not going to fit at 90% of the firms out there. So that's just how that is. If you're a generic quant and you're a student, you're just starting out, again, they're trying to read your personality. They're trying to figure it out. Most of you have not had to deal with ridiculous amounts of politics and conflicts, which occur absolutely everywhere. I've been around. I've worked for family. I've worked at small firms. I've worked for big global firms. There's politics and conflicts consistently. How you handle that is absolutely critical. Your employees also reflect on you as a hiring manager. So I take it very, very personally how my employees perform. I don't like to be, there's lots of managers that go, oh, that wasn't me. That was so-and-so. That was my employee or my manager that worked under me. And they screwed this up and they're terrible people. Good managers will actually take all that onto themselves. So when my employees build a garbage model or they validate something terribly or the quant dev piece is crap, I'm mad because I'm mad at them because they didn't do the job I wanted them to do. But more specifically, I'm mad at myself because I gave you the task assuming you could do the task, and then you didn't perform it well, and then I didn't check the work to make sure that the proper quality was delivered here. So when you're hiring, you have to start thinking through these processes. They're trying to find the perfect candidate for the team, and everything listed on the job posting is not everything they want in a candidate. And when you interview too here, everybody has an opinion. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an example here on this. So when I was at one of the firms, we were hiring someone to be a director. So I was junior. I was just doing the work. I think I was like a senior associate. I was a peon on the bottom pole, right? And they waltzed in there and they interviewed with my boss, who was the managing director at the time, or maybe the director at the time. Maybe this was for an associate director. Anyways, I was an individual contributor. They came in, they talked to my boss. My boss loved him. They talked to another guy that I worked for on the team that was another associate director that led projects and did all that stuff. He loved her and thought she was great too. So they were like, okay, this is an awesome rock star interview. She waltzed into our interview with, the three little peons of me and my two colleagues that were just individual contributors, and she would have managed us. And so, of course, my boss and the other associate director had quite a few questions that were very high level, understanding of banking and processes and loans. And her resume looked great. She was an expert in all these areas. She had a PhD from a good school. She'd published good research. And then she came in to interview with me and she failed every single technical question. Okay, now remember, I'm just an individual contributor with two other guys. It's a group interview. There's three of us. She failed my colleagues' questions. Again, my junior colleagues' questions. And she smiled and nodded. And then she went on to go to lunch later that day with my boss. And she asked, how do you like the team? How did you like the interviews? How did they go? And she goes, oh, it was great. I answered all their questions. Amazing time. I'm really excited to work here. Like, she got the job. And so after this, we went back. So this is what happens when you have panel interviews. We went back into a conference room. And I told my boss, the first thing I said is, I want everybody to go first, and I will go last. She kind of smiled. She was, okay, that's fine. She knows I'm causing trouble as usual. And I even had the two other people with me say it, because I have been known to be quite negative, to be quite down. I'm always looking for the perfect candidate, the perfect personality, the perfect cultural fit. So I'm really hard to interview with. But I'm flexible in questions. I don't expect you to do everything right. I expect to give a little help. So this individual mentioned there's an issue on a recursion. They asked for a little bit of help. They got through the problem, they solved it, whatnot. I don't really care about that, to be honest with you guys. There's a lot of issues though with the personality fits and all these pieces. Anyways, and so my boss went, it went great. They loved her. They told us everything. Then they went to my two individual contributor colleagues and they said, she was terrible. She missed this, she missed this, she missed this. And so I'm thinking she's thinking she's going to be a manager. She doesn't need to do all the nitty gritty work. So she didn't even care, right? Our opinions don't even matter. We're just little, individual contributors. And so she went through this and my boss goes, oh, well, she told me at lunch, everything went great. She answered all your questions. And she goes, okay, Dimitri, what is your final conclusion? I said, she was terrible. She didn't even know the basics. And I just started going through the list of my questions and I gave every response because anyone knows I carry a pencil and paper with me for almost everything. And I took down all the notes, all the questions she had, all the help I gave her, all the wrong answers she gave. And I just started going through this entire list. Now, the thing that killed her in the interview was partially the technical piece, but more specifically, what was more important on why my boss said, we'll pass, was because she thought she was so confident and she didn't care about the opinions of us as the juniors. There's no way in hell she would have made it. She wouldn't have been able to manage us. It's just plain and simple. So there's a technical piece there, there's a confidence piece there, and there's a cultural piece there. And the fact that she didn't have the cultural fit, she was not going to have the cultural fit. On top of this, what she didn't realize is I was more or less the golden child at that point because I was carrying our team on all these critical projects for the entire firm, not just for our department, for the entire firm. So when I put my foot down and said, this isn't going to happen, right? I couldn't really put my foot down. I'm not the manager, but my boss knows this is going to be a really hard sell because if they hire her and I have to deal with her and then I'm pushing back and I'm fighting and I'm arguing, it's just not going to be a good fit. So one possibility here when you go through these interviews on why you perhaps got rejected was because maybe you just didn't fit with one of the people very well. Maybe they had a strong objection. It's a possibility, right? There's nothing you can really do about that. Personality-wise, you might just not fit. Don't take it personal. It's not a personal strike. The other piece here, too, is figuring out that, there are other candidates that you're competing with. So I get this a lot. It's really frustrating, especially from quants, myself included, when I was, in grad school. You see the job posting, you go, man, I hit everything out of the park on the required list. I hit everything out of the park on the preferred skills. I have everything. Perfect hire, I'm going to get hired. That's how they view it. They think it's like math. Like, okay, if I have all these things, then I will get the job. And somebody commented recently on a video I just posted about how, well, we have check the box mentality because that's what you guys want as a manager and a hiring person. No, the check the boxes on that list, even the required and the preferred, those are like preferences. Like I need to have those as minimums, like bare minimums. And then the additional skills is that preference piece here. I prefer you have these additional ones. But on top of that, you're still competing with a bunch of other candidates for this job. And there's still typically only one, maybe two open positions, depending on how they're doing hiring. Often I only have one open position. So I interviewed and looked at resumes for a total of 400 candidates that applied for a job. And I interviewed, I think, about 5 to 10 of them. That was it. Now, a lot of people got rejected because one, their resumes didn't meet all those skills. So the bare minimums, they didn't even have it. And then on top of that, when I do the interviewing process here, you have to meet all the bare minimums, but you also have to be culturally good fit. You have to be outstanding. There might be a specific problem I have at work that you don't know, right? You're not going to know. And I'm like, if I just had somebody to do this and I didn't even list it on the job posting. And often someone will say, oh, I actually wrote my undergrad paper on this topic. I took these sorts of courses. This is the area that really interests me. Again, not on the job posting, but that makes you stand out sometimes above and beyond other candidates. And so it's hard to kind of judge why you get rejected. Okay. So that's that piece. Now, the second question I want to follow up with here, kind of going through this process, is they asked, after spending significant time on the interview process from both ends, I believe a bit specific feedback would help the candidate greatly. So let me explain why we hardly ever, and most HR will tell you, never respond. Do not respond to candidates. Just don't do it. Is because there are so many factors, so many pieces that go into choosing the candidate, as I'm trying to show you guys here. It's not just like, oh, you check the boxes and hit these 10 things. It's not just that you were excited as well. Again, classes, projects, all this other information's coming into the picture here. And the hardest piece here is you're interviewing against a bunch of other candidates. So you might be, there might be, let's go back to this, 400 applications. You were number 2. But you didn't get it because number 1 was slightly better. Now, the reason we don't typically give feedback, one, is going to be that what I want and what all, if there's 11 people in this interview process here, give or take, maybe there's 5, 7, whatever. I'm only one person out of the whole group here. Okay. So you don't want to go in and say, well, I didn't hire you because I didn't, maybe your personality wasn't a great fit. You came off as a little arrogant. Or, you did excellent at everything on this list. There was another candidate, though. They were slightly better. They had a little more experience in this, that, or the other. Maybe they had a little more, let's say, an example, time series experience, specifically in stationarity testing and working more with pure maths around kind of like patterns and fractals, maybe some things like that. And then if you do that, then what happens is every candidate, at least most of them, will respond and say, oh, I have that experience. Why don't you call me back and I'll talk to you about this experience and I'll tell you how great I am. Okay, well, now you put the other candidate that beat them at an unfair advantage. So now you would have to say, okay, fine, I'll give you the interview, but out of fairness, I have to now call the other candidate and explain to them there's another candidate that wanted the job that we gave an extra interview to that no one else got, but because they emailed me, I had to give them an extra interview. Well, now you have to give the other candidate that was the first place position and explain to them if they still, now if they don't beat the other candidate, now you have to go to that candidate and say, okay, well, this candidate had these skills and this issue and this, and you have to go through this whole process. And then you have to do another interview, right? You start to get into this. And the issue too is if I give you feedback too, this is something else that I've noticed a lot with students, is if I say, oh, you don't really have a lot of experience in linear regression, for example. Right? It's one of those skills most of you overlook. You think it's dumb, it's stupid. My professors in the machine learning side, and I won't list any big names here, but these big name people said linear regression and statistics is stupid. Machine learning is great. One, your attitude sucks, so I'm not going to hire you. That's a common issue I run into. And two, you missed basic questions on linear regression. If I tell you missed these and you're missing this critical piece here, and you say, oh, I really know them. Now I interview you again or give you a second chance. Now what's going to happen is you're going to go restudy up now because you know now some of the questions I'm going to ask. So now this puts other candidates at a disadvantage here. So I know this sounds ridiculous, but what ends up happening is when you give feedback, one, you have people like me that say, well, you were too gung-ho on machine learning. Well, that's my opinion. I'm the hiring manager. I'm making that decision, but that's my opinion. Also, you shouldn't go change your resume because I give you that opinion, because the next firm you interview at might say, yo, like, we want a machine learning person. We love machine learning. We think statistics is dumb. And, this is all we want to do. And so now if you're changing the resume to cater to every interview just because something wasn't the perfect fit, you're never going to find it because you don't have who you are as a person. And part of interviewing, part of my job as an interviewer, is to find who you are as a person. And I know most of you being young students don't know that. I know myself, I often don't know every single facet of myself. And I talk to people and they point things out and I sit and think about it and go, huh. I just never thought about that piece of my personality. I never realized, maybe I don't get along with a very specific group of people. I've had colleagues point that out. But there are pieces that you have to kind of put together with this. It's challenging. The other issue too is if I say, I didn't hire you because, I filter resumes based off resumes. Then you have someone that might go and say, I'm going to sue the company. So this is a legal issue and an HR issue why they don't want you to respond often, is now you say, well, I didn't hire you because of this. The reality is I probably didn't hire you because of 5, 10, 20 reasons, especially for most candidates that don't make it to that final round. And now I don't want to get sued for that. Now, the other issue too is that it's really negative. It's combative. People say, well, give me feedback. Why didn't I get hired? It comes off as like this, I'm better than you think I am. Let me show you that. And I know this person specifically on my LinkedIn, though, is not that way because I've worked with them quite a bit over the past few years. And occasionally when you guys apply for jobs and you respond and you ask me, I break the rules. And sometimes I give you a little bit of feedback. Sometimes it's like you have basically no qualifications. Other times it's like a personality issue. I just don't think it's going to be a cultural fit. And I'll explain it to you. And kind of as a last story on this too is I don't know why, I never share who applies for jobs. It's all confidential HR and everything. But I was looking to hire someone and one of my employees was asking about, how I'm doing the hiring process and going through that. And so I started showing them these are the candidates on LinkedIn that I've worked with in the past that I've hired. These are some other candidates I wanted to hire last round, but I didn't get to hire them for a variety of reasons. And I'm showing them these candidates and they're just sitting there, they go, Dimitri, these candidates are 10 times more than I have. This guy's got, 2 PhDs and a master's. This candidate, has 3 years work experience and, at one of the top firms and, they've got an amazing degree from the best universities in the world. And they said, why did they're baffled. Why did they get hired? They got hired because they had a great personality. They had the basics and I saw something in them. They were teachable, which most candidates are not very teachable. I have to teach you again on top of your master's and your PhDs. Even if you have multiples, I have to do all this additional teaching. This is another big piece here. How do you measure that in an interview? I mean, guys, it's a gut feel. That's what we're doing here when we're doing interviewing. There are easy requirements. You have to have the grad degree. You have to have these topics. When I ask interview questions, I want to see that you're a critical thinker, right? But at the end of the day, companies don't like to respond because it typically never ends well. You might be the one rare person out there. If you got a little better feedback on the interview process, you would do better off and things would be better and, whatever. But to be honest with you guys, if you've made it through those full rounds of interviews, I know they're taxing. They are significantly more taxing on these firms. It costs them money and time and employees that are getting pulled off of projects to come interview you. Stay connected if possible, right? Just add 1 or 2 of them on LinkedIn and stay connected. If you're making it that far though, you're doing great, right? It's not that you're failing the interview because, there's typically never a issue. If you make it to these big interviews and you're going through rounds and rounds, it's not because there's one thing that's wrong with you. It's just everybody has a different preference on who they want to work with, how they see them fitting in the team, their responsibilities. There's a lot of moving parts and dynamics. And because of that, it's very, very challenging, even for a firm to say, okay, we're going to talk to all 7, 10, 20 people, whatever you interviewed with, and we're going to get a consensus. Again, it takes more time going back to those employees' hourly rates and figuring out how much you have to, take out of their day. It's a full process here, but just don't take it personally. Okay. If you are, again, especially if you're making it through all these interviews, if you aren't getting interviews, your resume sucks. I always go over this with people. If you keep applying and applying and applying and you aren't getting interviews, it's because your resume doesn't align with the job. That's what's happening. So you are applying, your skills you list aren't matching with the skills they want. That's one piece. If you're getting the interviews, but you don't pass like the HR round interviews, again, you're not explaining your resume to HR very well. HR is very simple. They don't know what quants really do. They're just checking boxes and making sure you meet all those minimum requirements. And then if you're making it to these hiring round interviews and you're going through them, you guys just keep practicing interviewing, talk to people, talk to your friends, add some people on LinkedIn that you interview with over time. Again, I wouldn't put them under the pressure of asking them for exact feedback. It just puts you kind of in a negative spot of like, tell me what you think's wrong with me, which is hard for someone to open up to someone else about, especially if they don't really know you. And it just puts us in a bad position because we don't want to get sued if you say like, well, I didn't really like this, that, and the other. And then somebody sues you. Even if the company's in the right 100%, if someone sues you, they sue you. You still got to go through the process. You still got to pay for it. I know most students won't sue because they don't have the money for it and these firms are bigger. But it's really bad practice to ask for feedback. I know it sounds horrible me telling you that, but as a hiring manager, it's a bunch of extra time. It's a bunch of extra headaches. And often if you're making it to final rounds, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just getting beat out by, different talent that's going to fit a little bit better. You're obviously a great candidate if you're making it through all these rounds. Because if you were a terrible candidate and you failed the first one, they would literally just cut you. They wouldn't have you go through all the other steps here. So anyways, those are my tips and tricks and feedback here on why you should not ask for feedback on there. And also don't feel bad, guys. Getting rejected is part of applying for jobs. Even myself here, 9 years into a career, closing in here on 10 soon, I get rejected as well. It happens to all of us. Again, cultural fit's probably the biggest reason you're getting rejected. So anyways, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please do subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.